Minister Ahn, great to see you. Thank you for joining CNBC. I wanted to start off by asking you just to give us an update on how negotiations are going between South Korea and the United States.
Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to begin with. This afternoon, we will engage in the ministerial level consultation with the formal structure of the negotiation. We believe we laid out a good foundation for the consultation with the U.S. governments. And in addition to addressing the trade balance issue, we are also exploring constructive way to deepen our industry partnership with the U.S. government. So we hope to conclude this negotiation on time.
On that point, you're saying that today you're looking to lay out the structure of that negotiation. So are we still early stages, or would you describe it as getting into, I suppose, the nuts and bolts now, somewhere in the middle?
Essentially, the formal structure is about to begin. So far, a lot of informal consultation took place between the U.S. and many other countries. But today, it seems like the formal structure of the negotiation that will be adopted for the coming weeks and months, as are basically agreed among the major countries. So we will begin this formal negotiation on those agreed structure today.
Can we talk about the details of that formal structure? You said two prongs here. One is on reducing that trade deficit. The other is in relation to strategic partnership. Can you give us more details on what that means?
Probably it depends on the country, but for Korea, probably that is one of the major differences from other countries. In addition to addressing the trade balance issue, the Korean companies have invested in the huge amount in the U.S. markets, especially in the strategically important sector, such as shipbuilding, chips, and energy. So in that sense, we're trying to develop and explore the constructive way how we can strengthen this industry ecosystem together with the U.S. government.
So is it about emphasizing, for example, the FDI that we've seen from South Korean firms into the US, or also about talking about more of that happening in the future?
Both. During the past few years, the Korean government's investment strategy and business strategy have significantly changed. So now the top priority for our company's FDI destination becomes the United States. And also a lot of our companies envision more investment into US economies because they have technology, they have major markets. So apart from this tariff issue, we are preparing much serious engagement with the US industry sector and the US economy in general. So that is why, as a government, we're trying to build the stronger partnership with the US government. In that sense, we believe the current tariff issue can be constructively resolved between two governments.
And when you talk about that strategic alignment, economic security, I do wonder about the talk we've seen about whether or not South Korea could be investing in terms of the Alaska LNG project. Do you have an update on that? Is there going to be investment both in the infrastructure and then, of course, potentially a contract to buy that LNG once the infrastructure is established?
When Alaska, the governor visited us, basically they wanted to know how much we can purchase their gas. We didn't actually talk about the investment into their gas infrastructure there. So their request was about the long-term offtake contract. But for us, even for those arrangements, we have to be very specific about when the gas will be available, because we are completely dependent on imported gas. In case the availability, the date of availability is not exactly matched to the scheduled plan, then we will be in big trouble. So that was why we're trying to visit those places and then trying to discuss with them about the specificity of the plans, the development plans, and all those schedule about those ones. So far, we basically need more information, and we didn't have a chance to make any specific decision on that.
So there is, in principle, interest here, but the specifics have not been decided. And what about the investment in terms of infrastructure? Because I recall in a speech by the US president in the past, he said that South Korea and Japan have already committed trillions of dollars into this project.
In terms of energy security, if the gas is available in the Alaska, that will be very, very important for us. So, of course, we do have interest. But again, as I mentioned, it depends on the specificity of the project. So we want to know more about this project, and then that is why at our working step level, we are communicating with the Alaskan governments and the relevant companies on what is the schedule of the development and what is the availability of and the amount and what is the price and so forth. So we are currently discussing all these issues with Alaska.
What about shipbuilding? Because we're hearing that some of the top Korean shipbuilders were here on the sidelines of APEC to meet with Ambassador Greer today. Can you talk us through what kind of strategic alignment is there as an opportunity as part of this deal?
For many reasons, as you mentioned, the President Trump has the priority to rebuild the shipbuilding capacity in the United States, not just for the commercial vessel, but also for the naval force. Korea is well situated to support these policy priorities. So already, as you mentioned, some of the key shipbuilding companies in Korea showed a strong interest and already made a big investment in the United States. And as a government, we also discussed with the U.S. government about how to enhance the technology capacity and how to educate the people there. So we are discussing these issues. We are essentially exploring a huge future cooperation initiative in that sector.
So again, as part of this, are we talking about potentially more investment into the US and potentially some technology sharing as well?
Right, absolutely.
But again, we're waiting for those details.
Yes.
Can I also ask you about whether or not the US side has requested anything from the South Korean side in terms of how South Korea deals with China in terms of trade?
Not specifically, but as we have seen in the US and UK economic prosperity deal that was already uploaded in the internet, there were just some broad the statements about the economic security issue. So on that matter, we are willing to cooperate with the US government, but our policy is not to alienate any particular countries. So the China is currently talking to United States. So it depends on how they resolve this issue. We're trying to accommodate their agreement, and both countries are very important trading partners for us.
So I've spoken about Alaska LNG, I've spoken about shipbuilding. What other issues or deliverables will South Korea be raising potentially?
Essentially, one of the major differences for Korea from other countries is our companies have become the largest investors in recent years, especially in the manufacturing sector in the US. So we trying to basically establish a secure industry ecosystem together with the United States. That way, as a government, we're trying to rectify these tariff problems as soon as possible. Because we are making huge investment there. The current tariff can cause big trouble for future investment partnership. That is basically what I'm working with the Ambassador Greer and Secretary Besentor Lutnick. We strongly believe that we can resolve this issue nicely with a win-win solution with the United States.
When we talk about resolving the issue, what is it that South Korea is calling for? Because we know that the US side has said that baseline 10% is universal. So are we willing to accept that from your side? And what are you calling for when it comes to the Section 232 sectoral tariffs, particularly for steel, aluminum, autos, and we know down the line, chips?
Right. Essentially, our position is to eliminate all those tariffs. Again, as I mentioned, those tariffs is causing the trouble not just for exportation from Korea to the United States, but it's causing the trouble for our the industry ecosystems. So we are basically explaining these situations to the United States, and we hope to be able to find a solution, but at least we want the result no less favorable compared to other countries' arrangement. So we are closely monitoring what the US is doing with other countries, and then we're trying to discuss with this situation with the United States. We're trying to secure the fair competitive conditions for our industry sector. That is our mission as a minister in charge of industry.
Have you received any kind of preliminary assurances, framework proposal from the US about what they are willing to accept when it comes to tariff?
Not yet. As you can understand, I cannot mention the specific detail of what is going on in the negotiation. But as I mentioned, basically this APEC meeting provides essentially the very important formal beginning of the engagement with the U.S. Governments for this tariff negotiation. So from next week, the working step peoples will seriously engage with the specific details of the issues with the U.S. So it'll take a little more time.
Understood. On the first deal that was struck, which was between the US and the UK, do you hope to achieve something similar to that? Because you said that you're watching what's happening with the other deals very closely.
That depends on the how. The similar deal means the exempting all the automobile trade. Then, of course, we want that. But the magnitude of the volume of auto trade or the steel trade volume between Korea and United States is much bigger than the trade volume between the US and UK. So it's a completely different game.
Understood. And you said, of course, the goal is elimination of these tariffs. But if you were to prioritize the key areas, are you able to give me the top 1 or 2 or 3?
Well, of course, as you mentioned, the product tariff are a key concern, especially for us. The direct impact of the current tariff is in the auto trade. Auto and steel trade together accounts for almost half of our trade with the United States. So this product tariff is very important for us. And so like Japan and other countries, we are focusing on this issue first. If 10% tariff is uniformly imposed to every country, then in terms of the competition, basically we have no way to handle, and we have to accept this. And competitive condition may not be distorted much. But product tariff is different. It is targeting major trading partner. So we are focusing on this issue currently.
You know, you bring up Japan, and certainly what we're hearing coming out of Tokyo is that movement on those auto tariffs for Japan is basically a non-negotiable. Would you characterize it as such for South Korea? Autos, steel?
How should I say? I cannot say it's non-negotiable level issue, but I can emphasize that this is very, very important, one of the top priority issue for us. We clarified this priority to the US government already several times.
Understood. You also mentioned at the top of the interview that you are optimistic that you will be able to conclude these negotiations on time. Do you mean before the 90 days is out? And is there any chances of a framework of a deal being agreed before the South Korean elections on June the 3rd?
Practically speaking, it will be almost impossible to conclude before the elections. Only after a little more than 2 weeks from now, we have an election. So
Indeed.
Yeah, that is just a too short period of time. The current schedule of the negotiation appears to be the next ministerial level engagement probably will take place sometime in the middle of June. That is already after the presidential election. So it will take time, but we aim to conclude this negotiation on time, which means the end of the temporary suspension schedule, the July
Early
8th,
July.
Yeah, early July. We will try our best to conclude this negotiation, but you never know because we are in the middle of the transition period, so we cannot eliminate the possibility to not to meet that deadline, and then probably need a little more time.
Yes, and that's what I wanted to raise as well, given that there is the election coming up in just a few weeks' time. Doesn't that complicate the negotiations?
Yes, it's an unusual situation, but I believe that the whole negotiation can move forward without much turbulence. I'm currently reporting to both parties of national assemblies so that we can relay the current negotiation smoothly to the next government. So I do believe that our next government will be able to take this negotiation, and also all our working staff level people remained there. So they are the one actually engaged in the real negotiation. So no matter what happened in the leadership, I do not think that can cause too much trouble. But still, again, as I mentioned, like when you have a new president, maybe new president want to have like a summit meeting, then that kind of event can cause some kind of scheduling difficulties.
Understood. Has the political uncertainty been raised by the US?
No, so far no.
Okay. Has the negotiations, I know, it's still ongoing, but have they been tougher than what was expected?
Yes and no. So in some area, the US government position is very, very rigid. But in some other area, they also show the flexibilities. So as you mentioned, like initially we want to eliminate all tariff, but it looked like 10%, the basic tariff seems to be kind of the baseline of the negotiation positions. But then they show huge flexibility for product tariff, despite their initial statement about those auto and steel issue. So we're trying to basically communicate with the U.S. government and to find the constructive room for win-win solution.
I mean, we know that when you're negotiating a trade agreement, we're usually talking about years, yet we have 90 days, right, in this pause. So we are aiming for some sort of a framework only, right, an agreement to continue to negotiate like the US-UK model, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you, given the seismic shifts we've seen in terms of US trade policy that impacts South Korea, but it impacts virtually, the world, has Korean firms lost confidence at all in the US as a market long term? Because before all of this has happened, many countries in Asia really saw the United States as a really key market for growth moving forward.
Hard to tell. Of course, we are experiencing unexpected uncertainty and turbulence, but the uncertainty is just one variable of the business and economic policies. You have to be able to accommodate these elements. The U.S. market is still very important for us because they have the technology, they have the leading talents there, they have a future market there. So our companies somehow trying to incorporate the dramatic paradigm shift, and then they try to find a way to survive. And as a government, basically we believe at the current situation, trade diversification is critically important for the industry that seek to secure stability and predictability. So as a government, we basically trying to provide the trade networks as extensive as possible. So we basically established the using free trade agreement and also a more flexible trade arrangement with almost 100 countries. So Korea has one of the most extensive trade networks with a trading partner. I hope that this kind of arrangement can help our industry and our trading partner.
You actually took my next question when you started talking about trade diversification, because that is a clear theme we've seen as well since April the 2nd. Many countries talking about new alignments as well as diversification. I know that you've been speaking with many trade ministers from the various Asia-Pacific economies as well, yourself and your trade minister. Can you give us a sense of any of concrete moves on that front that we could expect coming from South Korea ahead? Is there an intention as well to push forward on some of the trading blocks you're already involved in, like the CPTPP, for example?
Well, trade diversification is very important in principle, but it is actually very hard to provide or to implement under this spirit. So that is why I explained that Korea is probably one of the few countries that actually provide this extensive trade diversification that is actually feasible and plausible for the industry sector. The trade blocks, of course, we're trying to reach out whatever kind available trade blocks or trade initiative. So APEC is very important for us. Any multilateral trade forum is very important for us. But for a while, we do understand also limitation of this global the trade effort to push forward this agenda, especially right now, because of the U.S. trade policy and other countries the reaction, the WTO and other multilateral forum are losing their basis.
Yeah, so again, conversations I've been having today suggest that to get to that joint statement by the APEC Trade Ministers today was a difficult process, given what we've seen in terms of US trade policy in the last 6 weeks or so. So how does a country like South Korea that believes in multilateral cooperation then contend and find common ground with the US that clearly is in favor of bilateral dealings, right?
We still have a strong commitment to the multilateral and global trade forums. We are one of the ardent supporters of the WTO system, and then during the past few years, we worked very hard to lead the U.S. to the WTO tables. We will continue this work, and it may take a little more time, but we strongly believe that that is the only chance we can rectify the current problems.
Right. And we actually spoke with the Director General of the World Trade Organization today on the sideline, this week on the sidelines of APEC. Are we going to get meaningful reform this year?
This year, well, I should say the reform in the WTO is very, very important. But whether this year the members can agree on those reform proposal or reform initiative, I'm not sure.
US and China, we've seen that de-escalation welcomed by economies around the world. Do you think that this will stick past the 90-day truce?
Based on our experience during the first Trump administration period, US-China at that time agreed on some trade arrangement. I do believe that they will come up with some kind of compromise. And then that will significantly solve many issues other countries are currently dealing with. So we hope to see the positive result from the US-China negotiation table soon.
Absolutely, because, as we know, trade is very global and supply chains are interlinked, right? And, it's not just China, but when we talk about the fact that there are these high reciprocal tariff rates being applied on countries like Mexico and Vietnam, which is where a lot of South Korean companies, but also other companies, in Asia are set up. There is the indirect impact. And I wanted to ask you about that. How concerned are you about the indirect impact of this tariff regime?
That is very important point of our policy. Many Korean companies have their production bases spread all over the world. So when we have this reciprocal tariff imposed by the US government, actually that instigated a lot of chain reaction from other countries. So we do have a concern, not just for trade directly with the United States. We do see this huge impact on the supply chain and the problem in the industry ecosystem. So as you correctly raised, that is actually one of the major concerns for our policy.